Alrighty, y'all. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Um, my name is Tony Fazzino. I am the trap support specialist here at Brig. Before we begin, I'd just like to cover a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is going to be recorded, and the recording will be available in the next coming weeks. Please note that you can ask questions in the Q&A widget down at the bottom of the screen. Just go ahead and pop your questions in there, and we'll answer them. And you can also utilize the chat to talk with other attendees. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Aaron Sumrall. He's our Director of Outreach, Education, and Research. You have our attention.
Thank you, Tony. So we're going to get kicked off here tonight and something kind of to follow that same thread of what we did last month with John Tomacek joining John Kinsey, Brig's John Kinsey, to discuss the toxicants. We're going to follow kind of that same thread tonight with Devon Baete. Devon's an unbelievable trapper that I've got the opportunity to meet over the last several months, pushing a year now, Devon, I guess. And he's in Manitoba, Canada. And basically what has brought Devon full circle into where he's at right now, Devon has a degree or background in education and natural resources management. Before he went to work for Manitoba as their operations leader, their field operations leader, he worked as watershed management project managers and so forth. So he's basically, what he does now is he leads everything field operation based for Manitoba, Canada, and has been extremely successful in his efforts to combat that pig problem that's above our northern border. So Devon, I do appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So what we're going to do tonight is kick into the tree set, the art and the science of the tree sets, and for that it is exactly what the screen says. It's an art, and you have to familiarize yourself with a lot of different things to make sure that you're as effective as what Devon's come to be with using that tree set. And so we're going to talk about a few things that goes into that decision-making tree and how we incorporate those tree sets into your pig management situation. But then what we're also going to do is we're going to specifically talk for our part of the world where we're at, that's a heck of a lot warmer than where it is where Devon is most of the time. We're going to talk about how we use those tree sets and specifically in the summertime, where Devon can tell you a lot about what he does with those tree sets whenever those temperatures get a little bit colder than your freezer, Devon. So
Yeah, sure.
we're going to move into, let's see here if I can get this to work for me now. There we go. So whenever we start off is just with the pigs themselves. And I mean, we all know that they're masters of adaptations. And what we think about with pigs in the South is that whenever we see pigs start to heat up in the summertime, they change a lot of things. I mean, with the fact that pigs doesn't sweat, the fact that they need to stay close to water and so forth and so on, they can change a heck of a lot of their behaviors and tendencies in the summertime, which can sometimes make it kind of a tough situation to catch pigs whenever that thermometer starts to rise pretty high. But Devon, I know one of the things that y'all fight with all the time in the northern latitudes there is the transient nature of the pigs there. Do you want to kind of give us an idea what you're looking at with those transient pigs?
Yeah, so it took us a few years to really figure out, I guess, why I guess we weren't having as good success, or why we weren't seeing as many pigs basically coming back to our traps or just on camera. It took us a few years to kind of figure this out, but because we started going back like using corral traps and everything, and we've had success, but it was really only last year when we added an additional, like we have about 100 cell cameras out on the landscape, and we can just observe a lot of what these pigs are doing. And it's the same thing as what we've been seeing over the years with the traps, is that they're only coming around every few weeks. And it took us a little bit to figure out, why, I guess. And really it's because our pigs, they're not used to artificial food sources, for one thing. Like in Manitoba, it's illegal to place bait for deer and ungulates. So the pigs, when they're born and when they're growing up, they're not used to feeding on corn piles or any kind of food source. They're used to feeding naturally, mainly out in the bush eating acorns, and they're just constantly moving around. And it gives them, they have such a large range here we're finding. So they're going, 30 kilometers or 50 kilometers, some of the males. So they're always making a big loop. It takes them a few weeks before they come back. And then even when they're feeding, they don't group up together because they're not used to, going to a single food source. So they're very difficult to condition. So we can't do that whole stages of placing bait and then thinking they're going to come back, the next day and then start putting up a corral trap and eventually, wait and then use like a remote drop to catch them. It doesn't work for us over here. So that's definitely a challenge. And then being able to go out in the forest as well, besides being transient, they definitely do not like leaving the forest cover until well dark, like midnights to 3 a.m. typically. So and then we have really small groups. Like I'd say like 90% of all of our pigs are single pigs when we get them on camera. So we've been really successful with our corral traps the way we're using them. But the tree sets just gives us just another tool that's been very successful for us. So
Right. And then one of the things too that's a little different from where you're at and where we are typically in what we call the Bacon Belt in the South is that we have a lot more warm weather, a lot more rainfall in a lot of situations. And the habitat typically recovers a heck of a lot faster here than what it does there. So that transient nature is just a direct correlation to just the productivity of that landscape. They can't stay in a given area for very long. So, and then the other thing that we need to think about too with regard to that transient nature is also too human activity in the summertime. It may not be as much of an agriculture part of the world where you're out there specifically in Manitoba, but the human activity is still something that influences your trapping efforts and what you do is from what I've been able to learn.
yeah, for sure. Like mainly we trap within like a park near a park region that sees a lot of hikers and other public recreational users, and then just hunting. Like there's lots of hunting going on that's moving the pigs and recreational use. So yeah, you gotta work around that a little bit too. So and that's moving them around for sure. So
Right, right. Well, one of the things that really drives the transient nature for us in the South in the summertime is just they're after water. That's one of the things that we need to make sure that we stay focused on to change that trapping pattern here is that water focus, the water need. You alluded to something that's very important for us to remember in the South too, is that their feeding patterns and how they shift in the summertime. Because again, too, with pigs not sweating and the need for the water and such is one thing, but the other is that whenever they feed, their body temperature, just the metabolic heat of processing that food will cause their temperature to increase. So if you're already an animal that's relatively large that may be carrying a fat layer, you don't want to increase your body temperature if you don't have to. So one of the things we need to make sure that we focus on during the summertime is remembering that those pigs may not move until, like what you said, that you see up there between midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning. And they are extremely responsive to human activity here, whether that be agriculture or people that finally can get out and enjoy the landscape from being sheltered up for the wintertime. But yeah, there's just a lot of those things, those similarities that what we have just in a kind of a different situation, different setting. But one of the things that we do need to think about though is that what you had talked about as far as timing of the day that you see pigs and the movement and so forth and so on. This is something that we need to think about all over the planet, is that in the summertime, as those pigs start to shift their movement patterns to much later in the middle of the night, knowing what we know about the metabolic heat buildup and so forth in that digestive process, is thinking about the baiting. Devon, I know y'all got a lot larger animals up there than what we do with the moose and the elk and the things like that. Speaking of where I'm at anyway. So we have non-target species, regardless of what you want to call a non-target species. And whenever we think about minimizing the impact of those non-target species in the summertime, what we may need to think about is changing our timing of when we bait. because if we bait earlier in the day and we know we're not expecting pigs until late that night, then we're probably going to increase our likelihood of having non-target species concerns at the trap site. So, and then also too, tell us what kind of experiences have you seen in the past with having issues with bears?
Yeah, they're an issue, especially in those park areas. What we do for baiting, which we found our pigs, they basically prefer it buried. Like, I think you could take a pile, you could put it on the surface, or you could put it buried. And for here, I think it's because again that they're mainly feeding like natural sources, and they root a lot. I mean, that's so that really does help keep away, your deer and elk and other ungulates. I mean, still the raccoons and bears and stuff, they smell it, they still like that. So yeah, I know. What are your
That's
recommendations?
good. That's good advice. I mean, that burying that bait in the summertime, especially if you know that you can't make it at the opportune times to bait to minimize that exposure time. Then as far as trap locations, what are you looking for whenever you're considering tree sets and what in your part of the world?
Well, what we had really good success with was like basically using this equipment here that I have in the picture behind me. So we were going out to areas because I mean we had a thermal drone. We could take the snowmobile, fly over areas and locate where there was pigs, which is always going to be in the forested areas, even in the winter. And then we were setting up about a mile away from them, try not to disturb them basically where they're bedding, and then finding an area where they hadn't been to almost, so that it was almost like the first time they were coming to that spot. And that way everything was new to them. And again, it was setting up like right in deep in the forest. And I mean, because of the net trap, we can literally just put it on the snowmobile behind the sled and then unhook the hitch and just drag that anywhere. Like yeah, it works amazing really for what we need. So
Yeah, well, one of the things that you said there is just absolute excellent advice, in the fact that whenever you locate your sites for traps, you don't want to get inside their bedding areas or anything like that and blow those pigs out. And I think that's something that we need to remember, that regardless of the time of year, that's something that you don't want to do. And I think the using tree sets gives you that opportunity to be able to get into a given area where you know that pigs are there and stay quiet. You don't have to hammer a post in the ground. You don't have to scare things out of there and such like that. But you said something too it's much different from us here, is that here we'd like to trap in the wintertime. It's a very, very good time of the year, but we catch a lot of pigs in the summertime. And from getting to know a lot more about what y'all do in Canada, pretty much across the country, is there's not nearly as much trapping focus in the summertime as there is in the winter. You want to kind of give us a little bit of an insight of why that's the decision process?
um I'm not sure because I mean we do have good success still, not as much. I mean, obviously there's going to be more food available for those pigs through the summer. Um, but we still focus on trapping year, like with our traps, with the crawl traps especially. Like, um, they still seem they're moving around enough, and as soon as they come into a site, we still have good success with that. I think other areas it's just, I mean, a lot of it's staff and labor too, I guess. But I mean, they're definitely more difficult, or you're not maybe gonna have as often as success compared to the winter when they are a lot more hungry. Like when the ground's
Right.
frozen for 4 to 6 months, they have less food reserves, and they're going to be hungry and easier to capture over the winter, I think. So that's a main reason, I guess, why.
Right. Well, and then also too, one of the things that we need to remember, just because of that transient nature and how these pigs move and shift their behaviors, is the terrain limitation. Sometimes we don't have the ability to follow those pigs where they go, and being able to stay where they're at and being effective is a major situation, major issue.
Yeah,
So
we've been
what
able
we'll
to go anywhere. As long as we have a snowmobile, we can kind of go anywhere in the winter. Honestly, it's more this summer, limit us if we're on private land and it's all fields and stuff. So
Right. Right. So what, yeah, then moving on as far as advantages are there. I mean, we just spoke to the point that we need to go where the pigs are. I mean, they're not going to ask where we feel like going. We have to make sure we figure out how they move. And with what you've done in the past with all the cameras across the landscape and understanding that those movement patterns is critical to kind of getting an idea even before they move. If they are to move on you, where are they going to go? And following certain habitat types, terrains, and such like that. So, what do you typically see that as far as movement patterns and how those pigs move through the terrain that y'all have?
Through the winters, it's surprising. People think, they're going to be maybe going in the lower areas and cattails and stuff, and we don't see that here. We see them following high ridges, where there's less snow, obviously, and then a lot of oaks because that's where there's food, and then spruce. Like they really like to be undercover, I think is like what we see a lot. They want to be somewhere where there's thick forest cover, but not necessarily like thick willows or cattails, at least in this area. It's more spruce, evergreens that in the wintertime, are still providing some overhead shelter. Um, and that's typically where they move. I think more in the summertime, we're seeing them use valleys and creeks and that kind of thing because then it's close to a water source. Um, but yeah, that's typically. But they can once night comes, they can kind of go wherever they want to. So
Right. And then the added benefit of whenever you do follow those pigs wherever they happen to go, you don't have to worry about lugging those T-posts around to keep up with them. And then also again too, staying quiet, like what we talked about. But I think too, just in conversations with you, is that in your observations with using the trap in the trees and then those tree sets, the camouflage of the trees and the surrounding environment and such is kind of giving you some ideas that they're a lot less hesitant about going into a trap with a net on the ground with the skirts down.
yeah, for sure. That's like one of the major observations we saw over the winter. And you think like you have a white background of snow, and that would be very visible, but you can place that in the forest and they're just, they don't notice it. It's almost like it's part of the landscape and they come, especially you put it in somewhere where it's like thick spruce. I think, they're going through these thick areas and then all of a sudden there's something there. And I mean, the net probably feels a lot better on their faces and stuff than those pokey spruce trees and stuff. So they seem like they feel comfortable being around it and going right in it. So, and I mean, most of our captures are on first occurrence. So they're definitely not very wary of it. Um, and then compared to like us, originally we would place our traps, and then even the pig rigs out in the open, and we didn't have very good success. So I think just moving them somewhere where they're not coming out of an opening and then seeing something that's foreign to them, I guess. So yeah, camouflage is, I mean,
Yeah, and
yeah,
there's a couple of things I think too that we may need to draw a little closer attention to that just comes to mind in conversation that we've had is that our protocol and what we really try to hold to very, very firmly is conditioning is critically important to those catches, especially those larger catches. And that's just something that just because of the transient nature of your pigs that y'all really don't have that luxury.
yeah, we just can't. It seems like they come there and they can feed on a site, and you think, oh, I mean, they don't eat everything there. They're going to be back the next day, and they're not. Like it's very strange. And then the same thing, like you could have a group, but then only two come in, and then two more later, and over like an hour period, they maybe would all feed, but they don't seem to all feed together. So that's where a typical metal corral trap doesn't seem to work as well.
Right. Well, and that's something that I think is obviously unique to your situation, but I think it's something that's worth mentioning is that you have to be much more observant and whenever you do your camera assessments to kind of understand how quickly those pigs move in and out of that area. And by knowing the movement patterns there, it kind of gives you an idea of what you have to work with regard to conditioning time and things of that nature, where you may or may not have that luxury of a prolonged baiting period like what we highly recommend. It's just, yeah, every location is different. So
Yeah.
what we'll do here is go into actually some of the images here about the tree sets and so forth, so people can start to kind of put their mind around what we are talking about here. Is, I mean, obviously what people are accustomed to seeing is the most common method of using the trap is with the T-post. And whenever we have those T-posts, we have those 10 connection points to the post and such like that. But in the picture that you can see here, there's 7 connection points. So it's one of those that we don't have to have perfect symmetrical shaped areas to be able to make that trap function the way it has. And I think, Devin, that this is pretty much what y'all follow as a protocol as well too, is that as long as it's the right height and it's tight, you really don't worry about too much else.
Yeah, definitely. As long as there's, like you said, I think around 7, we do have areas where there's maybe more spruce or poplar close enough together that we can get, 9 or 10 or even more connections if we need to. But typically, yeah, doesn't seem like you need that many. As long as it's the right height and tension, yeah, that's key.
Right, and that's something to just make sure we keep that 5-foot height, and definitely the closer the trees are to the side of the trap is much more desirable, just because you can get that tension that much more appropriate. You can get the heights a lot easier established. But what happens in those is that if you don't have the trees to cooperate with you, I guess, is that if you do have to get those trees that's further away, that's okay. It's a geometry lesson in the angle that you have to take from the connection points on the tree to make sure that you get the right height of the net on the perimeter. So the other thing too, that's something to think about, is that I know that where you're at up there, there's a lot of changes of slope in the ground just within a given trap site. And one of the things that we need to remember is that you may have one side of the trap that is the exact height that you want it to be, and it's tight. But unless you do a good walk around that trap and make sure that you didn't have high spots on other parts of that trap where one side may be 5 foot, but the other side's 3.5. So, and I know that's what you do as well, is once you get everything in place, it's that final evaluation.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, because I think the first one we kind of set up, you think, okay, you just check it out 5 feet, and then you end up one side is lower, but I mean, we're able to set them up in those areas where there is a little tiny bit of slope or something, where we definitely, we wouldn't be able to put corral traps in a lot of those areas for sure.
Right, and the other thing too to draw attention to, just the size of the trees that's in the picture here, is that they're pretty good size. It's if you can get those trees that are 10, 12 inches in diameter, it's going to be a lot more rigid for you. You're not going to get the play that's there, and it's going to make sure that it easier to function, easier to work with. But then whenever we go to what we have here, earlier this week, Monday and Tuesday, I actually was in West Texas at Randy's place. Randy works with us, and a lot of our Pig Brig family knows Randy very, very well. This is at Randy's place, and you'll notice the difference in the trees, the vegetation there. Whenever we look at South Carolina, everything's 60 feet tall and pretty symmetrical and such like that. And then you look at that, and it's kind of a cat hair after a rainstorm or something. It's pretty gnarly looking. But one of the things there that you need to think about in those situations is the diameter of those trees. They're not very big. They're not much, maybe the size of a baseball bat, but one of and that's perfectly fine. But one of the things we definitely need to draw attention to is that look at the angle that some of those straps are attached to the trap. With that smaller diameter tree there, you may have to have a little bit more of a strong angle, because you are going to get a lot more flex out of that trap, and those trees are going to move around on you a lot more. So other things that you need to think about too with regard to the picture on the screen now is that whenever we have those smaller diameter trees there, you may need to have more connection points. I know there's places around the world that use as few as 5. I mean, we'd like to see 6 or more, but they get away with just 5. And whenever you look at where this is at out in the Texas Hill Country, you may need to have those 8 or 10 connection points. And I know some of the places that you go to, the trees up there, just because of the climate that you have, you may have the same tree that's the diameter of a baseball bat, but it may be 40 years old.
Yeah, like on some of the sites, some of the trees are like 2 inches even, where we have them connected to a small poplar. And I mean, there's not a lot of strength in that. But then from there, we'll go back 20 feet and then anchor that small tree to a large tree, like a large spruce or oak or something that's in the distance, just with a
Right.
long, ratchet strata or something. So
Right. And I know we have a picture that's coming up too that I think we can talk really specifically to that so everyone can see the there. It's basically, and you'll know what it is. It's whenever we see the hybrid set and using some of those situations like what you're talking about. But again, here, this is something that in this rocky ground where we're at in the Texas Hill Country, a T-post might not even be an option. And knowing where that terrain affords out there, it's not that you can't catch pigs using a T-post set, because they catch thousands every year with those T-post sets. But whenever you get to some of these stony hills and these really high rising bedrocks in the ground and so forth, the T-posts are just not an option. And then 2, you get out there and you can again tuck these traps up into that vegetation, where in the summertime out in this part of the world that we're looking at on the screen here, it may get to well over 100 degrees. And you can build the shade into that trap and to keep those pigs taken care of in that hot time of the year. And I know that just doesn't even sound anywhere remotely right. I mean, you're taking care of the pig, but we need to make sure that we keep that animal welfare component in focus, because it does get hot on them and they don't sweat, and it doesn't turn out well after about 9 o'clock in the morning in the South Texas heat. So same thing can hold true with you. I think you said earlier on, Devin, it was mid 80s, upper 80s yesterday where you're at in Manitoba.
yeah, no, yeah. I mean, it gets cold here, but it gets warm here too. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, the
for
other
sure.
thing to think about in this too, and I know we've talked about it before, is that you look at some of the really hard bends on the trunks of these trees or the limbs that are there, is making sure that you watch where you attach the net to, or attach those double hook cam straps to, because if you get above one of those hard bends, that bend is just a weak spot. And whenever you have those trees that may be of a smaller diameter and you're above a weak spot and those pigs hit the net pretty hard, you can break those trees off in those weaker spots. So what we'll do now, we'll go into some of the connections and the way what we recommend and how to attach these straps to the trees, and some tips and tricks that I know that you've seen that work really, really well for you. But basically, whenever you get the pig brig, you take everything that's in that kit and you go to the woods of your choice, the forest of your choosing, and you can use everything straight out of that kit. And the way that we have that here is, you'll notice that there's 2 double hook cam straps that's in this one picture. And it's just because the tree was further from the side of the trap for one strap to make it. So what we've done though is, whenever you do have the situation there where you have to use 2 straps to connect like that, you want to make sure that they're connected, they're hooked in the way that we have it hooked in there. Because if you just simply overlap the hooks themselves, with the pigs interacting with that net the way that they do, any slack at all is going to have those hooks fall apart. So, and I know that this is something that you've worked with over the course of your experience as well, and have got some pretty good tips on this.
Yeah, when those photos come up, I'll kind of explain what we've been
Yeah. Yeah,
doing.
and then here's just some more too, and this is one of the standard ways that we use to use those double hook cam straps around those trees. And again, this is obviously from the vegetation. You can tell it's in the south, but this is where the base I guess guidelines would be in the way that these straps are hooked up. But what we're going to do now is we're going to get into some of your pictures, Devin, and what you've done here and how you've adapted to that specific observations that you've made.
Yeah, so this is more when we're using like a long like an extra long ratchet strap, I'll say. Like, so we had an issue with, well, purchased extra long, ratchet straps to go 20, 30 feet, whatever, further to trees in areas. Um, we had one of the ratchet strap hooks kind of open up, I guess, which drops, the trap. So what we were doing is we were basically using quick links, and then carabiners on all of the connections.
Right here.
So it just had just a solid closed connection. So we didn't have any issues. I think with your cam straps, and especially with the double hooks, I don't think that's an issue. But when with the ratchet straps that we had, um, they seemed like they'd open up on that seam, kind of on that six or it's loop back, when they were just, yeah, with enough tension. So we were just using these carabiners and quick links to just, yeah, add a little more strength. And then because there's a lot of movement going on when those pigs are in there. So yeah,
And
for
just
us
quickly
making
remove the
sure,
possibility of anything going wrong.
yeah, it definitely, for the first few times when we were using them, it definitely gave me a lot more confidence with when we're using those ratchet straps, especially. So
Right. And then one of the things I think is just because of what you're talking about now is experience and working with the tree sets, starting out at an entry level, basically of just getting to know that tree set and then just basically learning from experience.
yeah, for sure. And it does give us a little bit more advantage when we're adjusting things, because we can just like drop the ratchet strap wide open. If we want to move the trap over one direction maybe a little bit or put more tension on one side, we can loosen it off, and then nothing falls to the ground, and then we can just re-tighten everything. So for those ratchet like connections, it definitely helped.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things on the screen that now that I think really is the most impressive that jumps off the at me extremely quickly is, for those of you that are in the South like I am, y'all pay attention to what the time says on that picture, and then look at the temperature. And I think there would be a lot of us looking for an excuse just to go ahead and let those pigs have a reprieve for the day and stay tucked in. But the one thing that we want to draw out in this picture is something we've alluded to earlier on, Devon, is the fact that it doesn't have to be a perfect circle. This is something that's more of a rectangular shape or so forth, and I guess just to kind of give us some insights on what I mean, we've talked about the height and the tension and everything else. What are any of your other objectives that you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, this site, it doesn't show it very well, but it's a really thick spruce on the one side, so it was a really good site. Um, but yeah, it wasn't perfect. Like the trees were closer together in one side, and then there was almost no trees on one, so it was more of an oval shape. Um, we try to keep the tension on the ground stakes, I guess. It was our only issue when we went so more of an oval shape here. So, I mean, we didn't have any issues, but some of the ground stakes were then going to be a little bit closer than other ones because we're more of an oval shape. But otherwise, yeah, we didn't have any
And I
issues.
think you draw a
So,
great point there with just regard to the shape of the trap itself. So in those altered shapes that what we're not accustomed to seeing with a perfect symmetrical circle is how do you position the skirt on the ground to know even where your anchors are going to go in the ground? How much in those tree sets do you use the component measuring strap?
we couldn't really. Just how we set it up there. It was more just going by the eye. I mean, you've mentioned a few times just how that net comes down, and then having, I don't know, you explain it, but how it comes down and then there's still a little bit of a curve to it,
A bowl, yeah, a belly
a
to
bowl
it, right?
shape. Yeah. So it's not just laying straight on the ground and then the net sticking out towards the middle or too much of an angle. Um, but I think with the nice thing about the nets is that it's not just a one entranceway. So even when they're caught, like they don't see one entranceway to get out, then they're putting tension kind of everywhere. there isn't just one area, I guess, that they're going to try to go after, I guess.
Right. And then also too, just like with the top of the trap, the skirt doesn't have to be perfectly symmetrical either, as long as you have those few key points that you need to take into account, with basically the skirt laying firmly on the ground, flush on the ground, with no really extreme or bunching of that skirt that would cause a tenting or something like that, where they can find a way to go under. But
To, to
yeah.
install these, we actually used like a 1/2 inch drill bit, like an 18-inch auger rod to pre-drill those ground stake. Like, because I mean, the whole reason why we kind of did have to get into the tree stays, we can't be putting in frozen ground, right? We can't using T-posts and stuff like that. So then using that 1/2 inch drill bit, and that really, yeah, allowed us to put those ground stakes in. And then
Yeah.
you did
And I
mention about
think that's
using that
just
rebar trick too.
right. And I think that's just something that still draws just a mind-blowing thought, is the fact that you're having to use a drill just to get through the ice. And yeah, that's something that's extremely impressive. The other thing here to think about with this, moving on to the next, is you'll see that with all the pigs in there, the thing that you want to focus on though is that making sure, this is an example of making sure that the net is tight, it's at the right height and so forth, and that you don't get too far away from the trap with the trees, unless you do something like what we'll talk about on the next slide, because the way those pigs are piled up on the side of that net there starts to push that net down. And if you're too far away from the trap and you don't have the tensions the right way, they can push that net down pretty far.
Yeah, so these are two like 300-pound sows in there. Like they were over 300 pounds, and then those are juveniles, but like there's over 1,000 pounds of pig in there right now. And um it doesn't show up very well, I guess, in the photo here, but we also have those midline straps on the trees. So
Right.
just like on those T-post setups, they're, what are they, a few feet off the ground, just to help
Right.
support those sides, right, from getting moved around.
Right. And then also too, whenever the pigs hit the opposite side, it keeps the net from kicking up. And giving that opportunity to pop the skirt up off the ground. So those mid post straps, an excellent point of making sure that they're there, even in the tree sets, to keep that net positioned where it needs to be. The other thing I think, again, too, just mind blowing, is looking at the time and the temperature on this picture as well. And somebody had to be there to take that picture. So, and I mean, and that's obviously who that was. Is in my mind, my fingers are already falling off just by looking at this picture, and thinking that I'm actually going to have to take gloves off to try to probably load those pigs up. So, and I guess that's something else too, is tell us, I mean, whenever you catch these pigs in these remote locations, I guess you're using still the same snow machine and in the sled to pull these pigs out.
Yeah, in this particular site, using this snow, and this time actually, we didn't have a lot of snow. It was much milder actually this whole winter. Um, I actually didn't think there was any days when I was like thinking like, oh, it's too cold to go out there, to even go out, check these traps or bait or anything. It was pretty mild,
You
really.
may get a little reluctance from people from Texas if you were to ask us whenever
Okay.
it looks like that. So I can
Yeah.
promise you that. So yeah. But yeah, that's something that I think that's just impressive, is that the dedication that some places have to have, and not just Canada, but in places around Europe and other in the world, is just inclement conditions are unbelievable, whether it's hot or cold. But here you can see a little bit more about the way that y'all got the trees positioned and set and so forth. And one of the things that you had said a couple of days ago is that you're already locating your set locations for this next winter and getting those prepped. So what do you do whenever you go in and you start prepping locations for where a pig brig is going to be in the next season?
I mean, it kind of looked really similar to what this site is. Somewhere where the trees are all spaced properly. Um, Still like, somewhat flat, and then just clean. You don't want any logs or anything or debris in the middle of the trap. So I clean out kind of all that, and then I mean, really just make sure there's some good camouflage cover around it. And then,
How far away do you want
yeah,
to stay from where you're expecting human activity?
yeah, the further the better. I mean, as long as we have decent access into it, I don't mind walking. I mean, that's the thing. Even with the pig rigs, like we'll take the snowmobile and we can throw that in the back of the sled, and then we just unhook it, and it still has our pull rope. And I mean, no problem dragging that thing in, you know, hundreds of feet or whatever off trails into a site. Like it's actually way harder pulling those pigs out than it is, you know, that pig ritz. I don't know, was it 80 pounds, 70 pounds? Like it's
Right,
nothing, especially when we're not bringing T-posts or anything else. We can bring
right.
everything,
Whenever,
including all of our bait in one go. So
right. Yeah, and that's a pretty impressive picture that you've got in some of those places where you do have I don't know, four buckets of bait, 4 or 5 gallon buckets of bait, then the trap, the anchors, the tools that you'll need, and it's all in one sled behind the snow machine. So yeah, that's impressive. The one that we've got here on screen is the one that we were talking about earlier. Is that whenever you have those extremely long pulls, and you put a T post, or you even use a smaller tree, chop a smaller tree off with a 2 inch diameter or whatnot, and put it right against the sidewall of the trap, and then run a strap further out so you can keep that tension and height the way you need to. This is just basically what we call a hybrid set. Sometimes we'll use those hybrid sets in corners of ag fields where we can tie to the trees in the corner, and then out in the exposed part of the field, we'll add T-posts to it. But the way you've got it here, you'll see the post at the bottom of the picture is that, for example, if there was a tree, the closest tree was 40 feet behind that post, you use that post at the side of the trap, and then you use your strap to go from the post to the tree, where you can keep your tension and your height the right way because it's attached to that post.
yeah, same with like we've only had to use one T-post at any of these sites, and that's just like you say, it's just to make sure the height is there. And then otherwise, yeah, usually we can find all the new sites I've found. We can find a tree, even if it's only a few inches in size, and then we don't have to use the T-post at all. But yeah, it's even
Right.
in this site, it wasn't too bad to actually hammer in that T-post when we needed to make sure we had another connection point.
Well, yeah, and then also too, you look at how hot it is on the picture there too. I mean, it's a balmy 11 degrees, so I mean,
Yeah.
there should be no trouble driving a post, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah, that's something that we may never see here with that kind of temperature, but that's something that I guess that just the basics of those tree sets, and a couple of things that we discussed to kind of wrap this up is that the way we would recommend that you familiarize yourselves with the tree sets is to get very, very familiar with the way that the pig brig sets up using the post on what we most would call the traditional style of setting that trap up. So how did you go about getting accustomed the way you use those tree sets?
I think figuring out the right diameter for the trees. I think that's something that, you know, you set it up a few times with the T-posts, and you just visualize really like, you know, you got to be 20 feet diameter or something like that. Because you definitely want, I think one point we always want to make sure our trees are a little bit further apart than what you would typically have for the T-post, because you do need some way of providing tension. And if you only have a few connection points, and if their trees are too close together, you're not able to put enough tension between the trees or between each strap. So, um, you know, other than that, just, yeah, I mean, it's experience, I guess, just putting up a few of them and then figuring out, yeah, from
The
there, I
more the
guess.
more you do it, the more comfortable you get.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And then also too, we've talked about the connection points, and we would like to see 6 to 10 connection points. And again too, I know that there's some around the world that have used as few as 5, and it's worked phenomenally well if they're positioned in the right place. And Devin, like what you talked about earlier, is that if the more the better, basically.
Yeah, and that's where like we use those additional ratchets straps, I guess, is we maybe only have a few larger trees to set the heights, and then you have your trap pulled out, you know, towards those, let's say, 6 sites. But then we then adjust from far, pulling that trap more, out to more of a rounder shape, I guess, or adding more tension to it. And that's where for us, it seems to work pretty well because like you say, like our trees in a lot of areas maybe don't grow as close together as like what you might have down the south. So
Right. So, and you're still looking for that general circular shape, but if you don't get it, it's not a game ender for you.
yeah, for sure.
Right. And then again, too, with just the terrain, I mean, that's one of the beauties of being able to move the pig brig into certain areas is it doesn't matter if it has slope. I mean, we can still trap on those slopes, but with regard to terrain, I think it's more of a finite situation there right at the trap where you have to do that walk around once the trap is in place to make sure that your ground wasn't uneven in certain places where you make sure your height's right. So the last couple of reminders there, I mean, it's something that Devon talked about already a little bit. Is that in certain times of the year, y'all prefer to bury your bait to minimize that non-target impact and such, and leverage that rooting behavior of what you see being a major tendency of your pigs there whenever that ground isn't frozen. So,
Yeah,
what about anything there as far as in the I guess the hotter it gets, the how much earlier do you get to the trap whenever the temperatures start to increase?
I mean, typically we still want to get there first light, no matter, even in the winter. I mean, it's actually very surprising how calm those pigs are after capture, especially with the net trap. I mean, they're not, it's yeah, we don't really see them distressed really at all, actually, until you get near them, right? Like our pigs do not like you walking up on them, that's for sure. So, so we still want to get there at first light. They're definitely more calmer first light than once the light comes up. Um, but then, yeah, even here, like it gets warm, so you want to get there first light to dispatch them. So,
Right, and the same for us here. I mean, whenever you're thinking about those trapping in the hottest parts of the summer, is that the earlier the better in a lot of ways because again, too, as those temperatures start to increase really quickly with those pigs not sweating, then that's an issue of having those pigs expiring on you in the trap. So that's never a good point.
at least with the tree set, like they have good shade cover usually. Like that's definitely
Right.
a big pro with that.
Yeah, one of the things, though, I want to make sure that we draw attention to as far as during the summertime of the year, and just an observation that I've had in those warmer climates and such, is that if you're using additives and attractants, if you like to use them, keep using them. But one of the observations I've had is in the summertime, a lot of those additives and attractants are a gel-based product, and being gel-based, that holds a lot of water. And I've seen in the past that many times over that using those gel-based attractants, high water content will draw ants in the summer much more commonly than they will in the winter when the soil temperatures are low and those ants are down deeper. In the summer times, if you're using those attractants that are gel-based and those ants find that gel-based attractant before the pigs get there, they're not going to feed. The pigs are not going to feed. So maybe think about shifting some of your additives or attractants in the summertime to be in the more water soluble attractants like your Kool-Aid powders and things like that. I don't know if y'all use any attractants or anything like that up there or not.
Yeah, I mean, pigs are kind of weird. Like it seems like they all have different preferences. I mean, for the most part, we just use straight soured corn. That seems like our go-to. And I mean, the winter time it's frozen. I mean, we still ferment it, and but it's more to deter deer and stuff. But yeah, we'll throw in some strawberry jello or use anise oils and different things. But straight, just corn for us, soured seem
Right.
like the go-to for us. So
Right. Yeah, and then the other thing is just make sure that you always observe what those pigs are doing and adjust and adapt accordingly. And I don't think that really matters where you're at on the planet. That's just sound management, is know what those animals are doing. And you can't manage pigs is easy if you're not out there watching what they do and learn what they do, just like what you've done over the course of quite a few years.
yeah, I mean, that's our biggest thing we've learned over this last winter, and just using the net traps too, is like just observing, just being out there and seeing what they're doing, how they're feeding, like what they're feeding on, and how they move. And I mean, the success of the net traps for us is that, we did show these two pictures and they were large captures, but those pigs did not show up together. Like those pigs were captured over 5 hours of a time, especially that one group. I think there was 13 juveniles. Like there was like 4 came in, and then a half hour later, a few more came in, and the ones that are in there can't get out. Otherwise, they would move on. Like they do not like being closed up together like that. So, especially the sows, like we caught a big group of 11. The little ones came in fairly quickly together, and then it was hours before those sows all came in, but the other ones were stuck in there, and yeah, they were stuck, and it almost attracted the other ones to it, and we would not get that with other traps, basically. So
Right. Right. Yeah. The versatility is just amazing. And then also, folks, so what we're going to do now, that kind of wraps up the content of what we're going to do, or what we wanted to discuss with you tonight. So now we're going to get into to basically you feed back to us what any questions that you may have, or observations that you've had, and Devon, myself, and Tony will be glad to answer them. And again, just like any of the other webinars in the past, is we're not going to leave until you run out of questions to ask. And even if you leave tonight and think of something later, then there's always that you can pick up the phone or send us an email or something of that nature, and we'll be glad to answer the question. But what we'll do now is, if you do have any questions regarding what we've covered, put those into the Q&A part of the feature there, depending on your device. It's at the top or at the bottom, but put those questions in, and I know that Tony and Margaret's going to help us try to field those questions. And again, we'll stay here as long as need be. So, Tony, is anything in the inbox yet?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for all that great information, Devon and Aaron. Looks like the first question we've got here is, after some of the other webinars talking about diseases, they're concerned about getting the pigs out of the pig brig without coming into contact with blood. Any safety suggestions?
Well, one of the things, I mean, it's going to be any of the traps. If you're going to dispatch the pigs in the traps, then there's going to be that concern of blood. I think the first thing first is to try to, I mean, one, you're going to ethically dispatch that animal as quickly as possible, but I think the firearm of choice is going to make sure that you minimize as much as you can. So just a 22 caliber is plenty sufficient to shoot to dispatch those pigs with, and that's going to minimize a lot of your blood and possibilities of contact with that blood. The other thing that I do to try to minimize that bloodlet is that, instead of a lot of people, you'd have the shot placement of choice is the ear, which is extremely ethical in a quick dispatch. But from my observations and opinion, is that even on a large pig with a 22 caliber, you can get a pass from one side to the other, and now you have 2 points of injury that's pouring blood. So you double the bloodlet in there, and that's going to increase your possibilities all in and of itself. Other things always to keep in mind is that definitely, if there's a concern about disease or anything of that nature that would cause you concern, latex gloves are great. Put those latex gloves on, those big heavy duty kitchen gloves that may be latex or even PVC. But if you're concerned about the blood and such, then nothing with leather, nothing with cotton, anything like that. So other times that I've had some really, the times I've had some extremely large catches, you may have that on your clothes. You may have blood on your clothes or something of that nature. So most of us have a utility room or a laundry room or something like that that's immediately through the first door of the house. Is instead of throwing those clothes into your laundry to wash with everything else, if it's just got a lot of blood on it, what I'll do is take those clothes and let them soak overnight in a bucket of water outside before I put them into to the rest of the wash. So, but one thing is just making sure that whenever you consider the possibilities of disease, is don't let it dictate what you do. I mean, use some sound management, use some sound strategies. Whenever if you have cuts on your hands, anything like that, then make sure that those cuts are protected. But the bottom line is that, yeah, just be mindful of it, but don't let it guide what you do. So I don't know, Devin and Tony, if you have anything to add, feel free to do so.
Yeah, just another thing I would add is, a lot of people will go underneath the net to remove pigs. And a great tip is if you just go ahead and unhook the net from a few of the T-posts and let it down, it's a lot easier to drag the pigs over the top of the net. You don't have to crawl in the mud, and it tends to, allow you to stay a little bit cleaner.
Yeah, excellent point, Tony. Yeah, and that's the way that I do. I mean, I'm uh, not a fan of having to get in the mud and everything where those pigs may have been to begin with. So unclipping 3 or 4 of those points are super, super easy. So, and then Devin, where you're at in the cold weather and those times of the year, that the blood's not really a concern too much anyway. It almost freezes instantly.
Yeah, it's definitely not as big of an issue, but that's a good point though, going over top. Because I mean, yeah, you go underneath that net. That's typically how we do have dragged out the pigs, is going underneath the net. And yeah, it's I mean, they're just trampling all over it, even though it's frozen ground. Still, yeah, it's more sanitary,
Right.
definitely go over the top, like you mentioned.
Is anything
Awesome.
else that we have there, Tony?
Yeah, we've got one question here, and they're asking, is the sewn-in trap cap better than the clip-on trap cap, the one that you can purchase after you have previously purchased a trap?
I don't think there's going to be just a drastic difference in either of the two. I think it's something, if you put that clip-on trap cap on that existing pig brig, it's just making sure that you follow the installation instructions, because it's going to come with the carabiners to attach it to the top and to the top of the trap, and there's sufficient carabiners there that you'll have about 3 carabiners between each post. So you're looking at a 6-foot span there between each post, and you're going to have those 3 carabiners there. So that's not much room to have any other issues. I do know that others out there that have attached those clip-on caps, they'll add an extra carabiner if they so choose. But as far as the holding the pigs and having pigs get out, comparing the sewn in to the clip-on, no, there's not a difference there that's going to cause any concern. And I think, Devin, y'all have all of them with the sewn in caps already, right?
Yeah, yeah, we do.
Looks like we've got one that says, have you had many pigs cause chew damage to the trap?
Well, there's going to be tendencies of pigs from place to place that may be more prone to chewing than others, but the by and large, what's going to drastically minimize the possibilities of chewing is, one, following what we would recommend in using a lot of bait. If you keep those pigs occupied on bait, you keep those pigs consuming that bait, then they, by the time they get finished feeding on what they would prefer to feed on, as much as they would prefer to feed on, most time, largely 90% of the time, those pigs are going to lay down and they'll sleep the rest of the night off. The other thing is that what we see from talking to the few folks that have had some concerns in the past is getting there early. It's one of those that whenever you know that you're going to put that trap into catch mode, you need to make sure that you've already got your calendar cleared off, that you need to be there at first light at the latest the next day, because whenever those pigs start to feeling less secure, that they don't like where they're at, is going to be about daylight. Whenever they start seeing the sun come up, they're going to want to go back to those thickets and those brushy areas to stay for the rest of the day. And that's whenever they really start ramping up their aggression to try to leave that trap, and their chewing tendencies too. So just make sure that you use enough bait, and make sure that you get there early, and that's going to drastically decrease the possibilities of any kind of damage. And so, and Devin, I know that y'all follow basically that same protocol with a lot of bait, get there early.
Yeah. I mean, the main thing too we've seen is just making sure you don't have any bait underneath like any of the net areas, like especially on the edges,
The skirt,
and
yeah.
then the skirts, and then keeping it to the center, right? Because you get you get a bunch of pigs in there overnight, and then they got corn that spreads out, and yeah, you get some right. I mean, they're going to be going after it. So,
Yeah, excellent point. Yeah, that's something we don't want to do just because of what you're talking about. If there's anything in the skirt, then you're going to have pigs chewing on that skirt to get to the bait. And then also too, we don't want to do that to cause pigs to slow down on their entry to come into that net, because if there's bait into that skirt, there may be some hesitation that they're going to feed on the bait as soon as they encounter it. And if it's in the skirt, that's going to slow other things down. And then other concerns come from that too, that we see in other times of the year. But for what we're looking at right now, using tree sets and how we bait and such, that's excellent point.
Awesome.
What else do
And we
we
just
have there,
had
Tony?
another question pop in. And they asked, what is the recommended time to allow pigs to get used to the trap before you set it in catch mode? And can you describe the initiation process?
Yeah, what we do, and Devon's is completely different than what we do in a lot of other places around the world. They don't have the ability to condition pigs like what we strongly recommend, just because of the transient nature of that animal. What I use as a protocol, and it's what we really stand by, is that whenever we put the trap up, we get that pig brig in place, and it doesn't matter if it's a tree set or if it's a post set, is that first time that we bait that trap or we condition that trap, about 90% of the bait's on the outside. We put a lot on the outside of the trap and just a little bit on the inside. And the reason for that is you've got a large piece of equipment that's new to their environment. They're going to recognize it. And if you take that trap and you put the pig brig up, regardless if it's post or trees, and you try to immediately force those pigs into that trap, those pigs can really push back quickly and try to do everything they can do to stay away from that trap site. So by baiting it to allow the pigs to dictate the process is critically important. So once we get that bait on the ground the first time, majority on the outside, a little on the inside, then from that point on, it's going to dictate the process of how long it's going to take. So if that first night that you bait that trap, they go to the inside and eat that 10% of the corn, then on the second night, there's going to be 100% of the corn on the inside of that trap. If they are already showing you that they're ready to go into that trap, no matter if it's the first night or the fifth night, once they show you they're ready to go into the trap, then don't give them the option of feeding on the outside anymore. Then they're ready to go in. So basically, I let the pigs dictate the process, and for some places it's going to change. I mean, if those pigs have been pressured heavily for a prolonged period of time, some of those older 10-year-old sows, they may take 2 weeks before they go into a trap, because they've seen every trick in the book and they've been educated to avoid anything that looks sketcy. Wherein you can go into some of the other places like what Devon's got there, that they don't have they don't have the pressure. They haven't seen every trick in the book, and they literally completely avoid or don't have the ability to incorporate a conditioning period at all, and do extremely well. So you got completely different ends of the spectrum. But when given the chance, you need to err on the side of conditioning until the pigs tell you that they're ready to go. So that process may only be 3 days, 4 days, but it could be 2 weeks. But let the pigs dictate the process.
Absolutely. Well, that looks like all the questions this time. So, thank you again, everyone, for your time. And like I said, keep an eye out in your email. We'll be sending out the recording, and we'll also have some notifications of upcoming webinars. So,
Yeah.
thank
Thank you,
you,
Devin.
everyone.
I do
Have a great
appreciate
night.
your help tonight. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
We do appreciate it.